60 knots.
Check.
V1. Rotate.
Is this mic on?
The mics are on. Welcome back to another episode of the Blue Skies podcast. We are joined today by two guests, Madison Furgala and Anna Pangrazzi, both representing Apex Aviation. So thank you, Madison and Anna, for joining us today. We look forward to learning a little more about the two of you and what you both do in our industry.
Hello.
Hello. So if we can start it off, Anna, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, your journey into aviation?
Sure. So I started flying in 1977, a long time ago. A math teacher in high school got permission to teach a private pilot's ground school in my senior year. And I took that course and I loved it. It showed me what you could actually do with math. And I joined a flying club that summer and got my license in 3 months.
Wow.
And I wanted to do commercial airline flying. But at the time, well, there was a recession in the 80s, and there was also a condition that you had to have 20/20 vision uncorrected, and I did not have that. So I pursued a degree. I got my instrument rating, my commercial license, and I finished my degree in Toronto and still wanted to do something in aviation. I was still flying, and I met Kathleen Lang, who is also on the board of Northern Lights. Mm-hmm. She had a small company at Toronto Island and selling airplanes. And she took me under her wing and taught me the business. She went on to sell for de Havilland. I went on to found Apex in 1988. And that's the story.
I've always wondered, very, very simple question, but how did you come up with the name Apex?
It was hard. And it's such a simple name, and so many people have it. I probably could have been a little bit more creative. But
it's a good name.
Yeah,
good name.
It's, Anna Pangrazzi Excellence. Well, it's Apex, so.
It's also first in the phone book.
Yeah. Yes, and it is first.
That's smart, yeah.
And Madison, why don't you start off as well by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I took a helicopter tour of Toronto City when I was 12 at the X. And I just remember my mom, who's very scared of heights, had wanted nothing to do with the front seat of this helicopter. And so I had to beat my sister for it. But I not literally just beat her to the seat. And I got to sit in the front seat of this helicopter, and the woman flying, the captain, the pilot, was a woman. And actually, believe it or not, I met her a couple of years ago, and I'll touch base on that. But so she did this 12-minute tour of downtown Toronto. When I landed, I said to my mom, I want to be a helicopter pilot. Now, I had no clue how to be a helicopter pilot. She had no clue how to help me be a helicopter pilot. So after a couple of years of different things, I ended up a flight attendant at Porter Airlines. And I think I was at Porter for about 3 months when I was like, oh, well, those boys up there can do it. I can do this. And I started taking flight lessons at Toronto Island. Started flying school part-time while I was a flight attendant, and then realized very quickly that I wasn't going to be able to be successful part-time. So I left my job and started full-time at the Brampton Flight Club ATPL program. And then ended up as an instructor back at Toronto Island and met the woman who owns Heli Tours. And turns out she was the person who flew me back. That would have been 20 years prior to that.
Oh.
And she was saying she was one of the only people who was doing it, the only woman at that time. So it was definitely her that ended up flying me when I was 12 years old.
Wow. There's so many full circle moments in aviation.
Well, there's 10 women? No, just... but I will say it's really small. And so the women in aviation community in Canada is amazing. We can get to that. But
yeah.
So then how did you end up meeting Anna or getting into Apex?
So when I was a flight attendant at Porter, there was the Northern Lights Mentorship Program, and it was sponsored by Porter. I actually don't know exactly the back end of that, but it was just on the table in our crew room. Put your name in if you're looking for an aviation mentor. And so at this time I was taking lessons, and I put my name in, and I remember filling out the info sheet, and it was like, is there anything else you want us to know about what you're looking for? And I was like, don't give me an airline pilot. Believe it or not, I know a lot of them. I already had a very good understanding of what being an airline pilot was like. I was looking for something different. I didn't know exactly what I was going to end up doing, but I got matched with Anna for the mentorship program. She's definitely not an airline pilot. I did not in a bad way, but it was exactly what I was looking for. It was something different.
Yeah. So you and Anna didn't meet each other before this program through Northern Lights?
Yeah.
You didn't know each other?
No. I had heard of her. Like in a little bit of a stalker-y way. Yeah. But no, we had not met before.
Okay.
I took her to her first Canadian Women in Aviation conference, where she met Judy and helped us. We were doing a video for the cocktail party, and neither one of us really knew what we were doing. So Madison helped us put it together with some music. And
it was so amazing. I was starting school about 6 weeks later, and I didn't know if I was going to get the time off, so I wasn't able to stay in the area that the Canadian Women in Aviation had. And Anna's roommate dropped out at the last minute, and I had just had a hotel offsite. And so she was like, "Do you want to be my roommate?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." And she like took me under her little wing. And then, yeah, she was like, "Are you good with computers?" And I was like, "Yeah, fairly." And she was like, "Here, meet Judy Cameron." I was like, "What?" And Judy was like, "Do you like wine?" I'm like, "Yes." And she was like, "I'll give you wine if you fix my presentation." And I was like, "Okay." And that was how I met Judy. So
That's a good deal.
yeah, no, I was quite happy with it.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
So Anna, you did found Apex way back in the day. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do?
Sure. Well, I founded it when I was fairly new to the business. I started in '85 with another company. This couple of guys that were running the company I was working for ended up self-imploding, and they really didn't know what they were doing. And I thought, I can do this better. So that's when I incorporated. And so mainly selling used aircraft. And then in 95 or 96, Cessna Aircraft got back into the business. They quit building airplanes for 10 years because of liability insurance. And they got back into the business, and they came to their maintenance facilities. And my office was in Leggett Aviation. And they asked us to be the distributor for Cessna aircraft. And Leggett's didn't really want to do it, so I became the sales arm for them. That was amazing. It was a really good thing for me. I sold a lot of new airplanes. And then in 2021, they made me the Caravan dealer. And I've sold several of those, but it's gotten a little bit harder. So it's been a very exciting ride. And having now Madison along is really helpful because she's very technologically smart, and she brings a lot of energy. We have a lot of fun.
Nice. So when you started out back in the 80s with this company, were there a lot of female mentors for you to lean on?
No, but Kathleen was really great. She really helped me. The 99s in Toronto, the women's organization, International Pilots Organization, was very helpful. A lot of them became my clients, so that was good.
Win-win.
Business for you, yeah.
Yeah. One of them, Margot McCutcheon, she had 2 airplanes, and we did the Air Race Classic, which is a transcontinental all-women air race in the United States. And we did that in 1990. Learned a lot there and flew with Margot a lot in her Baron. Yeah, so there were, the 99s are great, and they're lifelong friends now.
And Madison, what exactly is your role within the company now?
I bring the passion and the energy.
More passionate.
That is actually, I don't have necessarily like a very clear answer for that. Anything that's asked of me, but primarily we'll focus on sales.
Okay.
And she's great at it.
I wear a lot of hats.
So what are some of the strategies that you have found, or both of you found effective when building trust and credibility with clients in this industry, and particularly with selling aircraft?
Well, I think it's just, being honest with people, just trying to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish, whether they're buying or selling an aircraft, and getting them in the right plane. A lot of people, when they get their pilot's license, they want the fastest, the most well-equipped, de-iced aircraft. And I've always been one to try to say, take baby steps, get into something that, you can afford, build some time, figure out what your mission is. A lot of people think their families are all going to fly on trips with them, and sometimes that's not the case, People go up once and they don't like it. So it's not that difficult, but yeah, you have to have their best interests in mind, I think.
Just to kind of add on to that, sort of what Anna said, but I find transparency is always my best friend. Everybody's busy and nobody wants to waste any time. So if you're just as honest as you can be from the beginning, no one likes the car salesperson like tactics, right? Just be honest, be transparent, and always have your client's best interest.
That's true. I guess if you maintain those values, they'll be able to rely on you and trust what you're saying.
Good or bad, just be honest, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you guys have some sort of process where you will meet with the person and find out exactly what their needs are and all these details to help, get them that correct aircraft? Or is it just you slowly find out, and like, how does that process work?
I guess it's kind of a two-part. So we work with buyers and sellers. So it depends on who our client is. So if the client is selling their aircraft, then yes, we meet with them and their aircraft and go through a full process of appraising it and listing it and finding the right price point. If we're working with buyers, then yes, we would sit down with you virtually or in person, talk about what you're looking for. And then we do an incredibly thorough search and just send you everything, good, bad, ugly. And just, the more feedback that we can have, the more communication. It helps us narrow things down.
I see.
If you tell us what you don't like, it's easier to find what you do like.
And is your clientele pretty equal when it comes to companies or institutions versus just individuals looking for a plane?
Yeah, I think we would just work with whoever comes along.
Like, you guys aren't focused on like schools or flight schools or companies. Is like a person off the street, technically, if they could and had the credibility for it, they could come to Apex and buy a plane. It's probably one of the unique things about like general aviation is that the same aircraft, like a Cessna 172, is going to be in a flight school, but it could also be a private owner. Yeah. A person could be getting a private pilot's license or a commercial, or it could be a business. So any aircraft can be bought or sold by any level of that.
As a company, I kind of stayed in the single engine, multi-engine, piston aircraft, do some turboprops, but because I want to fly and, I've always been able to do that in my market. So I never wanted to sell jets because you become the salesperson.
Yeah.
You don't get to really fly them anymore. But then we've developed an expertise over time and a reputation. So we're pretty busy. We get a lot of calls. We get a lot of follow-up. And we have about 45 airplanes for sale right now, usually at any time.
Yeah.
And we sell about 50 airplanes a year. I think we sold 55 last year. So it's pretty busy.
And how has your team grown in your eyes since when you started this back in 88 to where you are now? So you have people like Madison that were proteges at one point that you've brought onto the team. Are you a big group of people at Apex?
No, there's just 3 of us. And we've had a student occasionally. So Madison came into my office. I think you were done with the program at Brampton.
Yeah.
She said, I just want to sit here and watch you work. And I go, well,
I had been telling her for years that I want to work with her. And she's like, well, pilots want to fly airplanes. And I was like, yeah, that's nice, but I want to work for you. And she's like, pilots want to fly airplanes. Go fly airplanes. And I was like, okay.
But it was right when I got the Caravan deal. So she came on to do social media and advertising and everything. And then after about 6 months, she goes, well, I think I can sell an airplane. And it evolved. And I remember the first time she had a 150 that she was going to sell. So she did this great big video of it and put it on Instagram. And she came in and she goes, I had 5,000 views of that 150. I know, but I said, well, did anyone call?
It was a good lesson. It's a good lesson.
Instagram is sometimes not the place they're going to find the buyers. You find a lot of people who like airplanes.
Yeah. Can you walk us through your first aircraft sale with Apex?
So that was it.
Okay.
It was 152. It's very specific in my brain. It was from a flight school to a flight school. And so, it was my first deal. I was so excited. And I got so excited. I flew to Montreal for the pre-buy, and Anna was like, you're doing what on a 152? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to fly. I'm going to go meet them. And it was absolutely amazing. And so, I kind of coordinated everything from one French-speaking flight school to a flight school out in BC, of all things. And then I was like, can I deliver it to you guys? Like, how great would that be? And he's like, no, we're a flight school. We're going to send an instructor that we don't have to, pay. And I was like, oh, no. So that was kind of my first introduction into it. And it was, a very exciting time to sell my first little 152.
How did you kind of know that this is what you wanted to do and this is what you wanted to continue doing?
I think a couple different things. The biggest thing I missed when I left being a flight attendant was people. And I realized I didn't want to be trapped in a small space with one other person for my career. The second thing is that my mom ran a small business. And so I had a very good insight as to what that looked like and what the pros and cons of working in a small business and working for yourself could be. And I knew that I liked that lifestyle. And so this was an ability for me to combine a couple of things that I loved. So people, flying, and working for myself, essentially. Between the three of those things, I figured I'd just give it a shot and see what happened. And it's been 4 years and I'm loving every minute of it and never going anywhere, Anna.
Yeah. Well, she sat right seated in a King Air for almost a year. Yeah, was it? And she said, "Oh my God, you know, flying across Canada one trip," and she goes, "It's so boring." Don't tell Kevin that.
My partner is an airline pilot, and I remember complaining on that trip. And he was like, "You literally are on one of the best trips. You're flying city to city. You're getting 16-hour layovers. You know, that's it. That is the dream for a corporate pilot. If you don't like this," and I was like, "No, I don't like it."
Well, you're pretty unique because you've stepped into various roles in this industry. You've been with the pilot side and flying everything, and the flight attendant side, now the aircraft sales side. Do you miss anything from being a flight attendant? Like you mentioned, the faces, but what about the flying? Do you get to do a lot of that even though you're an aircraft seller now?
I do miss flying. I don't. Because I don't fly as much as I'd like to. A combination of it's not my full-time job and I have a young family. So I will say that it is not my job that is the reason I don't fly, because I can fly any day that I want. Prior to having my son, I would ask to deliver everything. I was safety pilots for people who bought airplanes and from me and didn't have enough experience to fly, or I would do rental checkouts for clients who were looking to rent their airplane out. So I flew a lot prior to having my son. And it was just young family. If it's not your full-time job to fly, it's easy to say no to those opportunities a little bit more to stay home. So.
And were you an aircraft instructor at one point in your career as well?
For a very brief period.
Yeah? How was that?
Cold.
Like literally or rhetorically?
Literally. I started in September and I quit in March. And I got frostbite on my ear. No, it was a brief period. I think instructing is a fantastic first job for any young person starting out in the industry. I say this joke all the time that I don't know who gave me a commercial license. I knew nothing until I started instructing. So somebody looks you in the eye and asks you why.
Yeah.
And you can't just say, "I don't know, that's what the book says." You have to explain it. You really don't know anything. So I was an instructor for a short period of time.
I think it was hard because it was at the island too. So you get a lot of people who want to fly first thing in the morning and after work. And so she's getting up at like 4:30 and getting to the island by 5:30.
And working for Apex.
Same time.
Yeah. And then I got offered a job on the King Air and it had heat and cup holders. And I was like, bye.
Yeah.
So Anna, being such a professional in this space, I imagine you have a lot of experience. You sold 50 aircraft every single year. What are some challenges that you faced during the entire process of selling one aircraft from an entity to another?
First of all, the bulk of aircraft were built in the 70s and early 80s, and they were building thousands and thousands. So when you're looking at the market now, like I said, Cessna got back into the building of Cessnas in the late 90s. So you're either selling 20-year-old airplanes or, up to 20-year-old airplanes, or you're selling really old airplanes. So there's always a negotiation process. And then it's always conditional upon a pre-purchase inspection, a review of the logbooks, and a test flight. Whatever comes up, you have to negotiate from there. And on the older airplanes, it's hard because there's always, a lot of stuff. And we looked at a plane today and the technical logbook was like
8 inches.
Yeah. 8 inches. So that plane I don't think will be that hard to sell because it had a lot of maintenance on it. But sometimes you find airplanes that are, 40 years old that have an engine that's 20 years old. People don't understand really when they start looking at airplanes. So there's a lot of work you have to do to educate people. And There's always 2 or 3 negotiations. So it's easier to sell new airplanes because they're just a fixed price. But
what are some important skills you'd say is required for someone in this position to be a salesman?
Salesperson.
Yes, sir.
Oh my God, Arian.
Unbelievable.
Well, I think empathy, listening skills, reasoning skills.
I think listening, like hearing what the other person wants and then trying your best to find that what can make either, I'm going to steal your line, equally happy or equally unhappy between both parties. That is all, Anna. So that way you walk away at the end of the day fair.
And do you find that there are struggles with assessing the seriousness of a buyer at times, or when they come to you, are they typically always serious and a deal is made at the end of the day?
Yeah, no, it's not always that way.
Not always serious.
That is a real skill to figure it out. And I think you have that innate ability to do that. The guy that I work with, Bruce, he also has that innate ability because we're very busy. So you don't want to waste a lot of time with people who are kicking tires. And we have like a standard way we do things. So we have an offer form that makes it conditional upon a test flight. So we don't usually, screw around with people wanting test flights because if they really want it, it's conditional upon that anyways. Yeah. So, I think the systems that we have put into place to sell airplanes really help us narrow down to who's gonna make an offer.
You can pretty much tell in the first couple minutes of a call whether people are asking the right questions or not. You have a really good idea of where that's going to go. I will say that when it comes to buyers, when I first started, anytime the phone rang and somebody was like, I want to buy an airplane, I was like, yippee. And I'd start being like, oh, I'm getting commission. And I would be great. And then I'd never hear from them ever again. So there is like a skill that you learn to have conversations with people where you're, talking to them, but also you learn really quickly if they're serious or not.
And I also think it's like any kind of sales, like house sales. You have to ask for the close. A lot of people don't succeed in sales-oriented businesses because they don't ask. They, will continue to talk and show houses. But like the way that we've been doing it is you say, okay, if you've seen this aircraft, what don't you like about it? What is it that you're really looking for? So you've try to make sure you're matching them with what they want. And usually you can find something.
I very recently had a client who was unable to show their own aircraft that day. So I offered to do it. And it was a 2.5-hour drive. And so 5 hours in the car each way. And the client went, wow, it's really great that you did that. And I was like, well, I only do it once because he bought your airplane. So I knew that he was going to buy the aircraft even without an offer. I was willing to show it to him because we'd had good calls. He's asking the right questions. He obviously had experience. Yeah. He had done enough of his own research that I showed him the aircraft for, I think, 45 minutes. And I knew, right? And so I knew before leaving my house. Yeah. So there's ways that you can be more efficient with your time. And you learn that over, 10 phone calls a day, 6 days a week. 365 days. So yeah, it's a skill you learn over time. Yeah.
So selling new aircraft, selling new Cessnas, it's, I sold 17 to Seneca 172s and the Barons. Being in that marketplace, we go to the Air Transportation Association of Canada every year, and it is a convention where all the flight schools come and share best ideas and practices. So over, 40 years, I've got to know a lot of people. And that's another key is, relationship selling. Just because you don't sell them in that moment doesn't mean you're not going to sell them next year. Mm-hmm. So it's all a process of making sure you build relationships over time. And, it comes back to, because it's a big referral business. We get a lot of people that call us up and say, well, I was talking to the mechanic at Oshawa and he said I should call you. So, yeah, and it just comes back to running a business in a very honest, transparent way.
Yeah.
Has Apex been successful from the start, or did it take a little bit while for you guys to build it up to where it is now?
Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah.
I wasn't ever so, I would sell, I don't know, I can't even remember, 10 airplanes a year, 15. But I think when I first started, I was writing letters out by hand. It was in 1985 was my first job with, it was called North Star at the island. And,
Yeah.
but they, we didn't have computers or anything. No cell phones. Oh my God. It's funny being, this long in the business, because I remember my first website in 1995.
Wow.
I know, it's crazy when you think there was nothing like a website. And we actually thought that it would do away with our jobs because then people could just go online and buy airplanes. But it's still a knowledge-based industry. It takes a year or two to be able to recognize all the airplanes that you're going to sell.
A year or two? I still have a client right now who is like selling his airplane with me, and he's like, I'm going to buy another airplane after this, and I'm buying. And he said it. I was like, huh? It's like, it's a home build from South Africa. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't need to know that, but it still happens. So, yeah.
Yeah. So one question I did have for you, Anna, is for any of our listeners that are new to the aviation aircraft sales industry that might have some experience, but outside of aviation and aerospace. So, for example, a real estate agent that might be interested, do they have some skills that are transferable into this part?
Yes. I mean, I think that, sales skills are always transferable. I've never had anyone that worked with me that wasn't a pilot. And I think it helps to have that passion for flying and that interest in flying.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of questions right off the bat, like people think you know what you're talking about. So it really helps to, have some background in aviation.
Yeah.
Madison is commission only. I have never had a paycheck in my life. I've always been commission only. A lot of people can't do that. They want that steady paycheck. And so you have to have that kind of special attitude about being careful with your money because you'll have a deal and then you won't have a deal. So
you not spend your commission before you actually close on anything.
Yes. Don't eat your chickens before they're...
Yeah. I'll list an airplane and my partner is like, ooh, and kind of starts spending the money. And I'm like, no.
But it's a really fun business and you meet some very interesting, passionate people. And
just to add on, I had a client just a couple weeks ago who asked me for the arm, on the weight and balance sheet. And he asked me for the arm so that he could calculate if he was going to load up with family and these bags would the aircraft work for him. And I literally had to get out my from the ground up. Because I have foreflight and I don't do this very often. And so it was I did go back in my brain and be like, okay, what is the arm again? And so I think that there is a part to this job that you just truly couldn't do if you weren't a pilot. You can take natural ability for sales and people skills and build on that. But having a pilot's license, even just a PPL, I think is almost imperative in order to sell, in order to answer people's questions.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the fun part of the job too. Yeah. To get to fly these airplanes. So
what do you look for in candidates that might come to you and say, hey, Anna, I want to work for you? What background or prerequisites would they need to have on their resume?
What we'd be looking for is a young woman.
I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but just quietly we're saying that. So.
But someone who does have some flying experience and doesn't really see the airlines as a future or corporate or whatever. And someone who might start out like Madison doing social media and learning about sales and how we run the business and everything. So I told her she should go be a mentor for Northern Lights and
find our next me.
Continue the legacy.
Yeah.
So just to touch on that, we have kind of decided this year that we would like to take on somebody new for the first time in 4 years, and somebody who is interested, who has a pilot's license or is working towards a pilot's license maybe, and doesn't feel like the typical aviation roles, like pilot roles, are for where they want to go, and somebody who'd be interested in learning all of this and kind of starting out as a sales assistant and maybe developing into a sales role. I think we kind of decided that recently that we're going to start actively looking for the right person in the right ways. Nobody's putting a job posting on Indeed. It's not exactly how you kind of find these candidates. I think between our network, mentorship programs, Northern Lights, Women in Aviation, the 99s, the list goes on and on. We are looking for that next person to come on board.
So in the past, I have taken on others, people who thought they wanted to sell airplanes. But what they really wanted to do was fly airplanes.
Yeah.
And so you do get to do some of that. But really, it is a sales position. So you have to want to learn sales.
And then just say yes when they're like talking about delivering, or just bring it up right from the beginning. You're like, oh, you live there? Great, I'll bring it to you.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like flying is like a little treat that you get alongside all this.
Turn in front of us. It's great.
So Madison had a very frustrating first really long ferry flight from the Cessna factory. I went down to pick up. We sold 5 airplanes to Confederation College in Thunder Bay. So I went down the week before. Took us 5 days to get back. It took them 6 days to get back.
Wow. I got stuck in Thunder Bay.
No, from the Kansas to Thunder Bay in November.
Yeah.
I got stuck in a town called Mason City, Iowa, which is who's the guy who died there in an airplane crash? Buddy Holliday. Yeah, he's a jazz player. That's what town's famous for, is that this guy died. He took off in a storm and crashed over the lake. But I got stuck in Iowa for 5 freaking days over my birthday, which really didn't matter. But it was so icy and so stormy that we didn't even leave the hotel. Like, it was crazy. That was my first long ferry trip.
I know, and she kept saying, so what's your plan B? I go, there's no plan B there. You got to bring that plane to Thunder Bay.
I'm like, do I just eventually go home? She's like, no, you don't.
But you stay with that plane.
Oh, I live here.
Wow.
And it was definitely like an experience in ferrying aircraft, and the difference between what ferrying a general aviation aircraft is compared to an airline corporate instructing. You are out there in an aircraft that is typically VFR, like maybe you're filing, but you're not going into IMC weather
In November.
And you are like, you're in it until you're home and whatever happens. And I remember I took off. It was me and another pilot, and we took off, and it was like, I think it was day 3 of being stuck, and we're like, we're going home. And we flew for about like maybe 10 miles, and it just started closing in, and I'm getting lower, and the G1000 system is yelling obstacle at me, but at least I can see that it's saying 300 feet. I'm like, okay, well, 300 feet's fine. But I'm like, I'm on the radio, and I'm like, are you nervous? And he's like, very. And I'm like, I'm going to turn around. He's like, yeah. I turned around, I went right back. And the whole airport was like, hey, we didn't think you were going to make it that far. We want to go home. And so it was such an interesting experience, like ferrying aircraft over long distances, and the mindset. And like, it's a different skill set for flying than, a scheduled airline run where dispatch is doing everything for you, weather, like all of this stuff. That was one of the crazier experiences. I learned my new minimums. They're 600 feet, full IMC, icing conditions in a Cessna 172.
She's joking.
Very much. I scared
Transport Canada, Famayaji.
Scared the daylights out of myself. Oh, well, we took off in VFR, and within 20 miles, it just completely closed down, and we came.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so now taking a step back, like being a woman starting this business back in the 80s.
It's an interesting business because I think people will deal with you if you know what you're talking about and you're giving them good information. And obviously, most of the people I dealt with, especially when I was starting, were men. So I don't feel like I ever had that kind of discrimination against me in aircraft sales, in that business. And in fact, it was the opposite. When you called someone, they go, oh, yeah, I'll take that call. I want to talk airplanes, right? So that was good. I had, things earlier, like I worked at an FBO, and I worked for $5 an hour on the desk, and the guys pumping fuel got $8 an hour, and I wanted that job. And oh no, we don't let girls do that. I had a few of those. I went to the ROTC in Michigan where I grew up. I said I want to be a pilot, and they go, oh no, we don't train women. So there was a lot of that early on, and I had a controller say, I bet you have nice legs.
Wow.
What? Over the airport.
What year was it?
You do. 1978.
78?
Yeah. So there was obviously still some sexism out there. But I didn't find that in the business. I just think if you're dealing with people honestly and you kind of know what you're talking about, and if you don't know, you say, I'll find that information for you, that it was pretty good. So I started flying in 77. In 2008, when I'd been flying for 30 years, I started looking around, and there were very few women still in the industry, very few women pilots. I mean, very few women at Air Canada. That's why we started Northern Lights, just to bring some more visibility to women who were successful in the industry. And there turns out there was a lot of them. We never got visibility. I mean, in flying magazines or, Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame, there were very few women who were being inducted. So I think with Northern Lights, I think it's brought to the forefront of how many women actually have been in aviation for a long time. And hopefully it's encouraging women like you, Tricia, to go on and do great things. And I think the numbers are up. I saw the numbers recently. I think it's 7.3% now of women are commercial pilots. So
yeah, pretty neat. Madison, did you face any discrimination throughout your various roles in this industry?
I'm very grateful to say no. And that is because of people like Anna, like the women who came before me. And I'm extremely grateful. I haven't even faced a joke. I really feel lucky that I came into this at a time where I wasn't a surprise. But yeah, the only thing that was for me when I was a teenager saying I want to be a helicopter pilot, everyone kind of was like, well, I don't know what to do with that. But it never felt like to me that it was because I was a woman. It was simply because I grew up in a very small town. So my high school guidance counselor of a high school of 300 people was like, Air Force? And I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. I'll go do something else. And so it really didn't feel to me like it had to do with the female side of things. And then working as a flight attendant, which was predominantly a female-based career path, working with a ton of women. Actually, you know what I will say? The only time I ever had discrimination by any stretch was when I was getting my pilot's license, or maybe I was leaving my role as a flight attendant to start my program. And I had a flight attendant say to me, well, how can you be an airline pilot if you want to have a family? And I was like, you have the same career, like you have the same schedule. I was like, if anything, it's just worse off because you're making way less money, so you can't have help with your children. But how can you compare the two things? And flight attendants work way more hours than pilots do. And so that felt odd to me. But I've never had anything dramatic.
So, Anna, my understanding of how Northern Lights was created was that you and Joy were members of the 90 Nights. And you noticed a deficiency in some aspect, and you guys came together to create the organization. But could you explain the story from your side?
Like I said, I was looking around, and there weren't as many women coming into the industry that I thought should be, because it's a fun industry, and it's exciting and challenging, and there are so many different kinds of jobs. But I used to say when I was flying, like, you guys can't have all the fun. I mean, this is a lot of fun flying. So I was talking to some 99s, and Joy and I had been friends. I sat on her boards a few times, and she had been an event planner. So I said, would you get involved and let's plan one event and see what happens. We did it at a restaurant in Markham, and we had a woman, Heather Sifton, who was the owner of Bentonville Airport and a pilot herself, and had been very good to the people. She did a lot to keep that airport open. She got funding from the government because it's expensive to run an airport. And she had never gotten a lot of recognition. So she was our first recipient. Then Kathy Fox was our second. And then we thought, geez, if we're only doing one a year, it's going to be really hard to recognize all these people. Because then we set up a nomination process, and we were getting a lot of nominations. So that's how it started. And it grew from 50 or 60 people to now over 600. And actually, we reached out to Air Canada many years in a row, and they didn't want to fund groups like ours. But eventually we found Chantal Degas, and she is an amazing person who really has a vision for increasing diversity across the board with Air Canada. And So when they started funding us, we had a speakers bureau and the mentorship program that we started with Porter and some outreach events. Like we were doing maybe 5 or 6 outreach events a year. And we had a young woman who sat on our board who suggested a junior board. And eventually we got it started. Piyush Gandhi, who's a board member, helped us set up the whole process of nominations and board training and everything. And so I think it's been 3 years now, 4 years maybe, that we've had a junior board. So now this year, and obviously you guys sit on the junior board. So now we have a podcast. We're going to do 30 outreach events this year. The mentorship program is growing, and we have 11 members of our junior board, and it's great. It's made a great difference to the organization, expanded everything we do. So.
How was it balancing creating this organization with Joy while also having your, I assume, full-time job with Apex? Was that challenging at times?
Yes. Every day I did something for Northern Lights, it was between Joy and I, we were in constant communication. And it started out as part of the 99s, but we realized we had a vision that it would be more than just pilots, that we would recognize people across the board in business and education and all that kind of stuff. And so then we had to form a corporation. That happened in 2010. It was a lot of work, but I'm passionate about it. It's great. It's great to see how many young women are coming into the industry, but it's also great to meet women who have been in this industry for a long time and have done great things in education and in business. And it's incredible, the stories every year.
Yeah.
So it's been fun. So I don't look at it like work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever see Northern Lights becoming what it is today?
Yeah, I mean, Joy always talked about it being the Oscars of the industry, and I think it was Aria who said that last year.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. I don't know if we ever envisioned 600 people. I think it is like the go-to event, especially in Toronto, where the large part of the industry is. And then, Porter was an early supporter of ours. And Bob DeLuce always had the idea that he would have 50% female pilots. I think they're at 12 or 14%, so they've got a high level.
Yeah.
But it does take people with that vision. Yeah. We have Chantel, and obviously we recognized Ariel Malul Wessler. I think that's how you pronounce her name. She's the HR with Air Canada, EVP. And she also has a vision of, having a lot more women at Air Canada. So I think it's funny how you see a lot of other organizations have started right around the time or right after we started doing what we're doing. And I think it's really helping. I really hope that we can increase the numbers a bit faster now. And the more success that you see, I think it helps with bringing younger people into the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I really admire about you, Anna, is that you seem to enjoy what you're doing. You enjoy Northern Lights, you enjoy Apex, and not only did you enjoy, but you created both of them. How did you, become this entrepreneur? How did you have these skills? Where did this all come from?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
No, but my family was very supportive. My father was Italian, and when I said I wanted to fly, they're like, "Okay."
My dad. So when I was deciding to leave my position and go back to a full-time program, I needed him to co-sign my loan because I had no ability to do that at the time. And my dad was like, "Well, can I just buy you an airplane to learn on, and then we get to have the airplane, and you'll teach me how to fly?" And I was like, "No, I want to go to school. Like, I want to go to a program. I want to meet people. I feel like that's the best route for me." And even to this day, I work in aircraft sales, and he'll constantly be like, "Oh my God, what about this one?" And he sends me these airplanes. And so he has toy RC airplanes now that he flies around. My dad is extremely supportive. And I think that goes back to...
And that really helps, I think, to have... I know your dad is extremely supportive, right? He's a great guy.
Yeah.
I was never raised in a household. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and nobody in my house ever talked about what girls do and what boys do. So I think that goes back to, even if there was discrimination, that maybe somebody was trying to discriminate, I was like completely oblivious to it. My whole life, my dad raced dirt bikes, so all the kids got dirt bikes. Boy, girl, didn't matter. If you wanted a dirt bike, you got a dirt bike. Like, there was none of that growing up for me. So I just looked at something, wanted to do it, and did it, and never thought twice about whether I was a girl and that was acceptable.
Yeah. And continuing with Northern Lights, Madison, how did you get involved with Northern Lights Aero?
It was a condition of my job offer.
No, we fed her wine, and I started with that video.
Yeah.
She started with the video.
No, that was really it. I guess that was like the Canadian Women in Aviation Conference. The first one was I don't remember what year that was. But that was where I met Judy. Anna introduced me to Judy, and they had a cocktail reception at the conference. And I did the presentation, like a slideshow presentation for Judy, and was already half drunk by the time I came to the cocktail reception. And then I kind of started to meet everybody who was part of Northern Lights, and that's kind of where it came from. And
then when we started the board, I said, you should run for that board.
When the Northern Lights started the junior board, I was working for Anna, and she was like, I really think you should run for the junior board. And I was like, I'm not very junior. And I made it. Literally, I think I made it by like 6 weeks. Like, it was something crazy. I think my birthday that would have like made me too old for the junior board was like 4 days after the first board meeting. And so I was able to do 1 term on the junior board before I aged out. But it was a really great opportunity to kind of see how everything gets run.
And of course, she became the president.
Yeah, of course. Well, it worked really well for, I think, Anna and I as well, because we spent every day together. And so in order to create the junior board and have it work so well with the board seamlessly, was that we sat in an office every day. So it didn't take, that communication was there to start everything, get everything running. And then I was able to step down and let everybody else kind of come in after, once it was kind of running. And we set all the processes up, and then kind of handed it off and allowed it to grow to what it is now.
Yeah, we recently just had our AGM, and a few of the initial founding members also just retired. And it was a very emotional meeting. But you guys really did do a lot to set up an incredible foundation.
I actually just found out that like 6 weeks ago, my credit card was still being charged for something. So
maybe we should check that.
So, like, that's kind of just what it was at the beginning, was just, trying to figure it out and put it all together. So,
yeah. No, we're incredibly happy to even be in this position where not only can we be part of the junior board, but we have our own autonomy to do something like this. And we're supported from everyone in the junior board and also everyone from the main board. And no, it's been a great journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Piyush was a really big supporter from the very beginning, and he was part of why we got funding from Porter. And so he kept bugging me. I want to be on your board. There wasn't a lot of excitement to get a man on our board, but I eventually convinced him, and he's been a really great director. And I think he's very passionate about our junior board, which is great. Him and Kathy Fraser. I think it's such an opportunity to get board training from an MBA guy who, has sat on boards and, how to set it up. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Madison is part of the new CWIA board. And so it's probably a little bit you and Heather Hills, partly because of the training.
Yeah, no, it honest about it absolutely is. So I stole Heather Hills from your junior board. And Heather and I took Canadian Women in Aviation Conference and turned it into a nonprofit. And 90% of what we're doing to start that board came from the governance training that we received from Northern Lights. We wouldn't have been able to do it without that guidance, starting off. So it is exactly what Piyush wanted it to be, is an opportunity for young people to learn how to sit on a board, run a board. In my case, turn around and start another foundation that desperately needed a board in place for consistency and continuity, and able to take all of that. And I never would have had the confidence to stand up, and for Heather and I to stand up and say, we'll take this on. And now we're leading this board with people who are 20, 30, 40, 50 years older than us. And because we were able to learn that from being on the junior board and
I
being
think
part of the first junior board too.
especially for young people who don't get that opportunity. Now, you know, if you're offered the opportunity in the future of whatever board, you know, nonprofit or, you know, charity or whatever that you want to be part of, you have that experience and you can walk into a room and go, I know how this is supposed to work. I know how, you know, how I can give input. And I think it's great that Puish and Kathy have given you guys that autonomy to come up with new ideas, to say this is what we want to do. And, you know, when the budget was presented to us, it was pretty unanimous. We had a few questions, but you guys did a great job on budget. I mean, that's another thing that, you know, real learning process, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Madison, you're living proof of someone who's taken advantage of every opportunity that Northern Lights has to provide, right?
I never thought about it. She also brought a lot to it.
Yes.
Accidentally or on purpose? Yes. It has actually, I'm now realizing I owe everything to Northern Lights. But that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. So it's nice to see how the two of you have influenced an industry and organization that promotes women in aviation. But I did want to ask, do you still see there being a gap with women in this industry, particularly when it comes to sales and brokerage, which is what you both are experts at?
It's a small faction. There's not a lot of sales positions available across the country. I mean, there's also places like Diamond and Bombardier, bigger corporations that, you know, probably have a different structure for salespeople. And there's, you know, several brokerages across the country. So there is a gap there. There was another woman out at Prairie Aircraft Sales. She was my counterpart. She was also a Cessna dealer in Canada for the West. I was for the East. And there are not a lot of women in this industry. That's why we want to bring another woman into it.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't think I know another female in Canada who's a sales broker. And so there's a few in the States, and any time that I'm looking at an aircraft that they're representing, I'm like, yes, it's called the women. You know, while not trying to be stereotypical, this specific career can lend well to organization, communication, people skills. Yes, being a pilot is like technical, but I think I would say that what we do is so, you know, there's no reason that gender even has to play into it. And I think even so, more so, those skills, you know, women are, I'm just going to say it, women tend to be better at organization, communication, like that type of parts of it. And that's such a great, you know, thing to have. And I think the women are amazing and they can do anything. And so I would love to see more women, just so that I can work with more women. Women buying aircraft, just all of us getting together.
Yeah. Well, for anyone that's out there that's in high school right now, what advice would you give them in order to have them follow in your footsteps and get into the aircraft sales position?
There's a lot of pathways.
Okay.
And, you know, a lot of pathways leading through schools like Seneca or Confed or Sioux College has a program. There's a lot of programs around. And I think that to put your sights on sales maybe is a little short-sighted because there's a lot of different jobs in aviation. And so I would say just jump in. If you have a passion for it, jump in, figure it out, go to a college, Brampton or an airport.
Yeah.
Flying, see if you like it.
I would say sales is not really an entry-level position. So whether you're gaining experience by going to university, college, a program, or getting a job, or, you know, mixing and matching a combination of the two, typically speaking, you get more confidence as you grow up, as you get older, right? And so confidence is a huge play at this. You need to be able to pick up the phone and cold call and just start talking to people, or even more so, like Anna was mentioning, when you go to conferences or trade shows, just walking up, sticking out your hand and introducing yourself. And I know for myself at 18 or 17, absolutely not. Like my mom would be like, go shake their hand. And I'm like, do what now? And so that kind of comes. And so experience in any way that you get it, whether you're getting a job that's customer service focused in aviation or not, experience is definitely going to be your best friend. Make sure you, to Anna's point, see a lot, see what's out there. And if you are still saying, you know, I love sales, I love aviation, I love this, I do think it can work, there's going to be a right time. And then you can start trying to open up opportunities that would fit that.
Okay. Well, you've both given us advice for people looking to get into this industry. Let's switch this around. And Madison, you're a new mother, let's say. For those women in this industry that are also looking to start a family, what were your experiences like in terms of maternity leave in this industry, going out of work and coming back into work, all as a new mother?
This industry, I don't think technically applies to me in terms of maternity leave. So my son was born on a Thursday, and I think I was answering emails on a Monday. I remember my husband and I are laying in bed with this 3-day-old baby, and we're both on our computers, and he's tucked into the nook of our arms, just completely sleeping, because my role is so centered around me. You know, when you're an airline pilot, you're a number for a corporation, and if you call in sick, somebody just fills your seat. And there's a beauty to that you can take that time off, right? And somebody fills in your role, and you're not missed necessarily, and you can stay at home with your child for however long you need that to be. In this role, it's not quite like that. If I was working on deals in my last week of pregnancy, they didn't go away. I had auto reply on, and I mean, I have an amazing boss who helped out, but there was still specific things that were in my brain only in terms of open deals or anything I was working on with clients. And so to that side of it, I will say that there are those challenges, but to the other side of it is that I make my own hours. First of all, I have an amazing boss. I was like, let me just reiterate that. And not every company, not every role is going to be like that. And so, I plan to take a maternity leave, and step back completely. And then I realized that after, a couple months, I realized that I didn't need to completely step back. You know, I have an amazing support system at home, and I have a boss who I think I called you at one point, and I was like, okay, so my son's napping like 5 hours a day. If I can work from home 5 hours, like, could I come back, like, and kind of, we can just make it work? And she was like, oh my God, yes.
But she says, I don't think I'll be that busy. I don't have that much going on. I go, you'll be busy. You'll be busy.
And so I was able to actually come back early, and I love what I do. And that's also a piece of it. And so, you know, sometimes I can't answer the phone right away sometimes, but you know, if you're flying, you're not answering the phone right away. Like, nobody expects you to be super present as long as you're getting your work done and making it work. And I was saying earlier, I woke up at 5:30 this morning. And so I'm answering emails before my son wakes up to start my day. And then you're kind of just working around that. And then I have an amazing husband, who is an airline pilot. So he has a lot of days off during the week where we are able to make it work with working from home or going to the office. And then, of course, we have some hired help, which we count as our new family. The benefit to sales is that your income is typically higher than, you know, an average role. And so you're able to use that to kind of have that support to have kids. Do it, because they're amazing and wonderful. And it's hard, and time management is extremely important.
Yeah.
But I actually see my role the way it is as being more conducive to having a family. Like, I will never miss a field trip if I don't want to miss a field trip, because I can say, okay, I'm out of the office on this Friday. I'm going to the zoo or wherever we're going on the, you know, the kids' field trip. I'll never miss a birthday. I'll never miss a Christmas. I get to selectively choose that.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah, that is true. That's one big positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question kind of going back a little bit for you, Madison. You tried a various amount of roles before you stepped into this one. You were an FA for a short while, then you became a student pilot, then an instructor, and then you flew. And you did all this. How did you keep yourself motivated, you know, trying one thing and realizing, maybe this isn't for me, let me try something else. Maybe this isn't for me, let me try something else. And now you're extremely happy where you are. How did you do that?
I, in my early 20s, did a lot of different things that I didn't enjoy and I wasn't passionate about. And I kind of, you know, went one thing and the next and was like, oh, what's over there? And I kind of headed over there. Then I looked back and I was like, I need to do something with my life. I think my dad was like, you need to do something with your life. And I was like, oh, yeah, I always want to be a pilot. I'm going to be a flight attendant. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a pilot. And I kind of just made the decision. I stared down the barrel of all that student debt and was like, you're going to do this. If you do this, you're doing this no matter what. And so I knew right from the beginning, right from that mentorship program where I was like, I don't want an airline pilot. I knew that I was searching for something different. What that was, I was open to where that took me and trying new opportunities. But I absolutely love this industry. I love the technical side of it. I absolutely love turning my phone off and going flying. When I fly an airplane, I remember one time I was coming back from Texas on the King Air, and that airplane is not quite, like, technically it is capable of going from Texas to Toronto. Bladder-wise, that is pushing the envelope for the average human being. It was a 4.5-hour flight, and it was like 35 degrees in Texas. Of course, you're hydrated up before you even take off. And we were empty. And so I'm in shorts and a t-shirt flying home. My captain was like, use the potty in the back. And I'm like, I emptied the potty. I'm not using it. And so, but I remember the moment we were starting our approach, I completely forgot I had to go to the bathroom. And I love that feeling of when you're hand flying an aircraft and you're in the moment, everything else completely goes away. And I love that aspect of flying. I just didn't want to do it all day, every day, 80 hours a month. And so I love the technical aspect, and then I liked everything else that I got to see and experience. And then truly what happened was I wanted her life. I wanted Anna's life. I looked at the balance of, she flies, she talks to people, she sells, she ran Northern Lights. So it, the career that she chose allowed her the opportunity to take that piece on, which I had already been volunteering with women in aviation as a flight attendant. That was a big piece for me as well. So a career that allowed me to keep my volunteer roles, and not only allowed me but encouraged me to keep volunteer roles and be in the industry or be in the community.
Yeah, I find that this industry gives you whatever you're going to put into it, right? And it's a small world.
Also, my mom ran a business, and so I think work ethic was just ingrained into me as a kid. And you just keep working.
And she's pretty smart, so that's how.
So as we wrap up this episode, we wanted to leave you guys with a bit of an open-ended question to talk about Apex Aircraft. Where do you guys see the company going in the next few years? What innovations do you see coming up ahead in the future? Developments, changes, and what are you excited about?
I've worked with Textron for like 35 years, and 2 years ago, they bought a little company in Slovenia called Pipistrel. And Pipistrel makes the only EASA-certified 2-seat electric trainer in the world. And so Textron came to me and said, do you want to help us sell this? So it was at Oshkosh, and Madison attended a meeting with the executives there, and they said, do you want to do this? And we said, okay, we'll do it. So it's been a little bit up and down. The Pipistrel is a very interesting company. They have a lot of intellectual property. They've got a whole line of airplanes that are light sport, sailplanes. They have a eVTOL that they're developing, and this little electric airplane. So it's been a big learning curve for both of us. We were told that the electric plane and the light sport category were going to be certified last June. So we're a little bit stalled on that. We've sold a few aircraft. We've done a lot of work to try to sell the airplanes, and hopefully Transport Canada certifies it in the next 6 months. That's what we're being told. It's dragging a bit, but it's pretty exciting. Madison was just in Wichita attending a sales meeting and getting all the updates, and we went to Slovenia last year for the sales meeting. So it's interesting, it's exciting, and we're not sure where it's going to go, but that's what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. I remember talking about the learning curve. I remember when we were setting up partnerships for bringing this electric aircraft in, I was talking to one of the maintenance managers, and I was like, okay, so we'll put it together here and then I'll deliver it. And he goes, well, it's got a 1-hour range, so I'm not sure where they're going to fly it to deliver it. And I was like, oh, right. We're going to send the mechanic to the airport to put it together. That was such a different way to look at things. But yeah, the only type certified electric aircraft in the training world right now. And so we're hoping to that's going to become certified in Canada this year, and we'll be able to start marketing that as the next generation for flight schools and for training our next generation, and taking away the price, hopefully, for avgas and emissions and, being green and clean, and moving flight training into the next generation with clean training, clean aircraft.
Sustainability in aviation is something that's very niche. We're hoping to have Dr. Suzanne Kearns on an episode so that we can learn more about sustainability in this industry. But it's great to see that Apex is taking on this initiative, and it's just one more step towards a greener future, which is great. Our list here is, So again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Wishing you blue skies and tailwinds ahead. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.